Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I am going to be covering a top lane tier list for Clash. So this will be slightly different to a regular tier list, as within Clash you're going to be subject to different environments, such as a more team orientated environment. And I kind of wanted to give some drafting tips combined with just overall ranking a lot of the top lane champs. So let's get into it. To begin with, this is kind of the basis of what I'm going to go off for a lot of these champions, of like team environment, current meta compatibility. So if they're strong within the current meta, the overall strength of the champion, are they resource hungry, because we're in a very jungle bot sided heavy meta, where you're going to see your mid laner roaming a lot bot, your jungler playing around bot a lot. And what build options do you have? The flex potential, can you put it into the support role, the mid lane role, the jungle role, stuff like this. The difficulty of the champion, so you don't want champs which are too difficult. The average person doing Clash is around tier 2, tier 3, which would be around plat to gold range. So you don't want champs which are too difficult. Things like Jace, people are going to struggle to play a lot more than something like a Shen, which is a bit more simple. How well does it slot into your team comp? And is it a good response pick / blindable? So to begin with, I'm going to talk about the champ, which the only champ which I'm going to put in F tier again. That's Alistar. I don't think this champ's great at the moment. It can work if you go Wizard Alistar as like an AP champion, but it's a bit on the troll side, and it's not really it doesn't really compete at the same level as a lot of the other champions, so it's an F tier. The main way you're going to play Alistar, if you're ever playing Alistar, will be something like Radiant Barmies, Cosmic Drive. That seems to be the most viable build on him at the moment in the top lane, but even then it doesn't do as well as the other champions, so I'm going to leave it in the F tier. Trundle, even though he does have multi-role flex potential, he's not too strong at the moment. He doesn't do too well in the current meta. AD champions being on the rise does help him. He's a good answer to tanks and AD champions. But you don't really see support Trundle anymore. And top Trundle doesn't really see any play that much either. So I'm going to leave him in D tier. He is a good answer to a lot of AD champions and tanks. He can work, but I'd recommend other champions. Silas is another champ I'm going to put down here. Silas is mainly ever going to be flexed into the top lane as a counter pick to Malphite. You're not really going to see him anywhere else. Past in the top lane. He is a good flex into the jungle and mid. He's not too difficult. He does have a pretty high... He does have a moderate skill ceiling, but compared to a lot of the other champions, it's not really worth playing Silas unless you're into a Malphite, which he is higher in this tier list, so there is a chance. Gnar is a fairly difficult champion. You've got to be able to kite effectively. I'm overall just not a fan of Gnar in his current state. I don't think he does enough damage, nor has the survivability which he needs to be strong. He does work, and people do play him at the highest level of play, but if you're like plat gold, I would not recommend playing Gnar. There are other champions which can do similar things to him for far less effort. Viego isn't great, especially in the lane. His jungle buffs did help. The buffs towards Viego did help him in the jungle a bit, but you are very forced into going something like Kraken and maybe pick up some crit items. Overall, the bruiser changes didn't help him that much either, so Viego will stay in the D tier for lane. Lilia is also going to be in the D tier. Only really an answer to a couple of tanks at the moment. Does have flex potential, but isn't too strong. Aatrox really got hurt by the itemization. You have to build something like Cleaver into Iceborne at the moment, I'm pretty sure. Or Ravenous into Iceborne. Past that, not really going to be playing Aatrox that much. He's pretty weak at the moment. Cassante, hard for the average player to play. Isn't strong, like too strong at the moment as well. Has received a lot of nerfs to put him into a more balanced spot, so he's not as ever present in pro play. Quinn is another one I'm going to put down here. Quinn is a lot better in solo queue. She is like an 80 champion solo queue. And Clash, because people are going to be able to call out Quinn's roams. She's going to struggle to get ahead and the leads which she needs to scale into the late game or just play the late game. So she falls into the D tier. Yasuo, definitely recommend more towards mid and ADC. Yasuo is stronger in those two roles. Of course, with Gragas being higher in prio than he used to be, and like seeing a lot of play in mid and jungle, he can raise up because he does synergize quite well with Gragas as an AD enabler. So he is stronger, but I wouldn't recommend playing him. Yorick is going to get punished when he tries to split push in a more team controlled environment. It's harder to pull off just being able to run down one lane without someone calling you out. Pantheon is not bad, but he's definitely stronger in the mid lane. He's kind of weakened by the fact that a lot of the champs going into the new meta are going to be AD, or in the jungle meta are going to be AD. 7 out of 10, I'm pretty sure, are AD champs in the top 10 most popular junglers. Silas, Elise, and Echo, I believe, are the AP threats. And only really Elise and Echo are probably what you're going to see. You may see some Silas, but the other two are mainly what you're going to see. Swain isn't bad in the top lane, but I definitely recommend playing him in the mid. He's a good response in the mid lane. You can only really use him as a response in the top lane. He's kind of phase rush bound. You can run Conqueror, but it's definitely a lot harder. I'm actually going to have to power through a lot of these because this video is going to be forever if I don't. So, Alawi, Iceborne, but it is kind of tight to Iceborne, but definitely a lot better in solo queue environment. Tom Kench, a lot better in solo queue. Volibear, also a lot better in solo queue. Does have flex potential, but is pretty weak at the moment. Kennen is someone who I actually put in the B tier. I don't know, I put Kennen in the C tier. I just don't think Kennen is too strong at the moment. He does have value, like when with TP being kind of weak at the moment for a lot of top laners, it's not a bad summoner spell, but it's harder to find those flank angles which you want when you can't have it enabled until 14 minutes. I think that's what I'm kind of looking for here. Rumble is kind of hard to play. You got to really nail the mechanics on this one. He's not bad. I just don't think he's really that great in Clash, so I wouldn't recommend playing Rumble. Graves is also going to be down here. I think Lane Graves is a lot weaker than it used to be. It still has a place, but it's not as present and as strong as it should be, or as it could be. Renekton, this is Glass Cannon Renekton. You don't want to go Bruiser Renekton. Bruiser Renekton's really weak. Glass Cannon Renekton's the way to go. Play Glass Cannon Renekton, and you'll probably find a bit more success in Clash. But for the most part, you're not going to be playing a lethality top laner because of the way the rest of the map's going to go. Because if you fall behind on Renekton, you are just going to be a really big liability towards your team. So I wouldn't recommend it. It can work if you're just looking to power through wins. Definitely playable, but I wouldn't recommend it. Akali, definitely a lot better in the mid lane. Can be flexed into the top lane against starter matchups if you're in a bad matchup in the mid lane. You kind of want to go Night Harvester when you're playing top lane Akali. Riftmaker isn't that great at the moment, so definitely keep that in consideration. Victor is first up I'm going to put in the B tier. Victor has a lot of power as a flex perk. He's not bad in the top lane. He's also pretty good in the mid lane. Definitely really strong with things like Ludens, Leandries, into Seraphs. Also Lichbane, Rabadons, all these items are pretty powerful on him. Riven, I'm going to leave in the B tier. Riven is a lot stronger. Well, it is a bit stronger than she used to be with the buffs this patch, but kind of more solo queue orientated. And you have to be really good at piloting this champ if you want to find any success in Clash. Who are we going to go on to next? Soraka is who I want to talk about next. Soraka actually has value in Clash. The more team-orientated playstyle that Soraka has allows her to, well, you just have to be able to hold on for the early game. Your wave clear isn't great and people can push into you, but as long as you're not into a champ which pushes too hard, something like a Renekton, and you can just hold lane, she will outscale him and be a lot stronger in team fights. And because you can play for the bot side of the map through the top lane, makes her really strong in that regard. Ryze isn't bad in the top lane. Navs did hit him back along, but does have good setup, especially if you're playing like an AD jungle. Argot is countered by Warden's Mail. Argot will become weaker the higher tier you are in and the harder the opponents, but if you're in fairly mid to low elo, Argot is fine because he can go things like Cleaver, Prowler's Claw, and just chew through a lot of champions. He's not bad. He's a very good anti-engaged champion. Mundo, I'm also going to put down here in the B tier. He's kind of Heartsteel banned, makes him a lot better in solo queue, a lot worse in Clash. Wukong, I'm actually going to put in the B tier. I thought about putting Wukong in the A tier. He's not bad in the top lane. He's actually pretty strong. A lot better in the jungle at the moment, though. So, he does have flex value. Also, if you play Wukong, I definitely recommend playing him in the top lane. Can work. Rengar is another champion I'm going to put in the B tier. He's an S tier solo queue pick. He's a lot harder to pull off in Clash. So, I'll put him in the B tier for the moment. Kayle is a champ which I'm going to put in the B tier as well. You can punish a Kayle in Clash, but you can also allow her to scale up. If you know your win con of the Kayle, it can become really strong and win games for it. But one-sided meta, you're going to mainly see people playing for bot. Response picks come in later on. You can respond with Kayle if the lane is fine for her. So, it's possible. Vayne is a champ which could be in A tier, but I've chosen to put her in B tier. She's Not the strongest. She's pretty weak at the moment overall as a champion, but she has a lot of power in the top lane as someone who scales up, has a lot of kiting power, can bully out a lot of the strong top laners at the moment. Things like GP, she can beat that matchup because she can just pop barrels from a mile away, beats a lot of the tanks at the moment. Vayne isn't a bad pick. Nasus has a lot of value on his wither, but can be a liability if he falls behind, is kind of resource hungry, does want to be far ahead to actually play the game. Teemo, blind is quite valuable, same as like Nasus W, does scale up, has a lot of lane bully power. Doran's being nerfed actually gives him a lot more power than he used to have, because no longer getting as much health through the item. Not bad champ. Akshan is another lane bully, not harder to pull off than Teemo, but does function quite well. If you play Akshan, he's very strong in the top lane. I wouldn't recommend first timing him, he's a really hard champ to play. Garen, I'm going to put him in the A tier. Garen is pretty good at the moment. Well, he's strong. He's weaker than he used to be because the Mortal Iron nerfs hurt him, but he's pretty strong as just a stat stick, fairly simple champion. So if you want to play Garen as that kind of champion, then it does work. Also, can take people by surprise with the amount of damage he has. If you're weaker than she was before, especially with the nerfs, but still strong, things like Triforce, Divine Cinder into Ravenous, or Ravenous into the other two items still work quite well on her. Can bully out a lot of tanks, just not as blindable as she used to be. Can lose to a couple of matchups. Don't first time viewer, she's quite hard to play. Tryndamere has value on his W as an anti-AD, as just reducing AD on champions. Is a split pusher, but can be flexed into mid lane. Can just have a lot of power, raw power in team fights. His R is very valuable. Cassiopeia is also going to go in the A tier. Really strong anti-engage champion. Has a lot of chase as well. Items are really powerful on Cassie. Very, very good mid laner. Has a lot of flex potential in that regard. Heimerdinger. Definitely an A tier champion. Has flex potential in mid and support. Also can work as a bot laner. So a Heimerdinger support works with things like Ashe. Can also work as just a good answer to a couple of champions. You can place his turrets in front of hooks, stuff like this. It's kind of hard to play, but once you get past that curve, Heimerdinger is a good pick. I definitely recommend playing him if you do play him. Set is going to go into the B tier. I'm not a huge fan of Set. I think... this is C tier. I think Set is kind of reliant on early game leads, and if you fall behind on Set, if you itemize Set poorly, he does fall off quite hard. So he's not a bad pick, good lane bully, but I wouldn't recommend picking him over a lot of the other champions. Karma is going to go into the A tier. Karma has a really strong time if you go, is really strong if you do opt into like Moonstone. Radiant's a lot weaker on her after the cooldown nerfs, but Moonstone still works quite well. You can go Night Harvester if you want to go a more AP heavy Karma build, for like spamming out spells and just doing a lot of raw damage. But Moonstone, if you're going for more of a supportive bot side AD carry kind of focus build, where you're going something like Moonstone, Redemption, Ardent, that kind of a build works quite nicely. Gwen is a really good champion if you have an enchanter. Definitely recommend playing Gwen if you have an enchanter. Udyr. Weaker than he used to be, especially with the demonics and just overall nerfs towards Udyr. His chase potential isn't as strong in the top lane. He does have build options. He also has good flex potential into the jungle. And you can put him in the top lane if you have a good matchup in the top lane. I just don't think he's as strong as he used to be, so I'm going to put him in the B tier for the moment. Because there are champs which can do similar things and are like easier. I don't know if I'd say easier, but can do things to a similar level and possibly more. Aesol is a good champ if you play around him. Scales incredibly hard. Definitely if you want a good scaling pick and you have someone who you want to play around who is like a strong player, definitely pick Aesol as a top or mid champion. Very good. Vladimir is a good answer to a couple of champions. Makes him quite powerful. Also got good mid lane flex. I wouldn't recommend first timing Vladimir, but if you can play Vladimir, definitely an option to put him in the top lane if you want to roll swap with people. Sejuani, I'm also going to put in the B tier. It's definitely a lot weaker than she used to be. Like last season when the tank mythics were different, because she's now kind of tied towards Radiant. You can go Heart still, but I would definitely recommend going Radiant. Her build options do open up. Things like Sunfire's Fawn. You wouldn't really want to go Abyssal because a lot of her damage is AD. So, for the most part, not bad. Can build her more supportive as well. Things like Knight's Vow and Redemption aren't bad items on Sejuani. Gragas is a good champ because he can flex both into the mid and jungle role. makes him quite powerful. Can play as a tank in the top lane. Mostly you're going to play him as an AP champion though. Tank Gragas is pretty weak at the moment, so definitely recommend something like a Roa or a Ludens or even a Leandries as Gragas top. Darius, I'm not actually going to put in the S tier here. I think Darius is a very strong champion, but not really S tier worthy in Clash, because there's a good couple of champions which are just overwhelmingly strong at the moment and work really well in a team environment. Jace, I'm going to put in the A tier. This is a champ which does a lot of damage, but you have to be really skilled at playing it. If you're going to struggle playing Jace, I would not recommend playing this champion. He's very hard to play, and if you're falling behind, you become a liability. It's similar to the Renekton. It's just got more power than the Renekton because it does more damage. Well, it does more damage from a longer range and can have a lot more lane pressure. Renekton still has a really strong laning phase, don't get me wrong, but Jace can, with his additional range, can actively keep people at a further away distance. Until, at least, well, Renekton gets Proud of Score, then Renekton has a lot more power there. Poppy. Actually going to put in the A tier. Poppy's a really good response pick to a lot of champions. She's a good response. I wouldn't blind Poppy. Doesn't really work in the jungle as well as she used to, but in the top lane, it's quite good into things like Riven, Aurelia, champs which are kind of reliant on their dashes. Ornn, I'm actually going to put near the top of the A tier. Ornn is really strong in terms of he can upgrade teammates' items, which is a really powerful ability when the games are going to go longer. What you're mainly focusing on Clash is the fact that games are going to go longer. You're going to want you're going to want simpler champions, because if you complicate things too much, it becomes harder. You want good flex champions. Things like this are really important. You want to be able to play around your ADC. Your jungler wants to be able to play around bot side without fear of your top laner falling behind, which is why a lot more tanks in flex become a lot stronger. Yone is actually a pretty good champion at the moment. I'm going to put him in the A tier because he can work as a mid-top flex. A good answer to a couple of champions. If you're good at Yone, definitely recommend playing him. Cho'Gath, really strong champion at the moment. Got buffed this patch, which gave him a lot of power. He was relatively fine before the buffs. Now it's put him in a good spot. Can work as an answer to a lot of champions. I wouldn't recommend blinding a lot of these tanks, because if you blind a couple of these tanks, there are really strong answers towards them. Things like Gwen can bully out most tanks. So, and Vayne and a lot of champions can do the same. So it's risky blinding tanks, but if you need to blind tanks, you do have options. I just wouldn't recommend either Cho'Gath or Ornn. Things like Sion, which we'll cover in a second, has a lot more blind ability with the fact that he kept getting buffed, which made him pretty strong. Singed, I'm going to put in the A tier. It's, in solo queue, he's definitely an S tier champion, but in, in Clash, where it's a lot harder to find the right, where it's a lot harder to abuse what makes him so strong in the solo queue with the proxy, well, not just the proxying, but the overall disruption which he provides. You lose a bit of that in Clash, but you can still abuse that if you're if you know what you're doing on Singed, definitely. Warwick, I'm actually going to put in the A tier as well. Warwick's a pretty strong top laner at the moment. He does a lot of damage. It can surprise people, and you can get ahead through the amount of raw damage you do. Lots of sustain. You just have to be careful, because if you fall behind, it can be really painful to play Warwick. Tristana, I'm also going to put in the A tier. A three-way flex. Really strong champion at the moment. Make sure you go Navori if you're playing Tristana. Things like Kraken Navori. You can go Galeforce Navori, but I definitely recommend Kraken Navori. Her build is fairly set in stone. You just got to mainly focus on being able to abuse the windows where you're powerful, and kind of go from there. Mordecai is a really good response pick to a lot of champions. Does well into most tank matchups. Just has a lot of burn, demonics, Rift Maker if you choose to go at his passive. Just gives him a lot of tank killing capabilities. Can just take someone out of a team fight. Be careful though, he can, if he's not really far ahead, he can just fall off in the game, and will just lose to most champions in Shadow Realm. Even if he's fairly even, you can just lose to champs if they have more wits. Camille, really good pick potential. I'm not going to put her in the S tier because some of the champs are just overwhelmingly strong. But Camille is a really good champion. Definitely recommend playing if you are good at her. Anivia, really good champ as well. Really strong in the mid lane, really strong in the top lane. The nerfs basically did nothing to her. Roa Seraph makes her really powerful. Lots of control. Control is something which is going to be a lot more prevalent when I'm talking about Clash, because you are looking for champs with good control setup. Things like Caitlyn, Anivia, GP, Kiana. All these have really good zone control. because of the way their ults or their kits work. Kled is really strong at the moment. Works well as a top mid flex. We've seen it in the LEC now. Stride Breaker or Eclipse are the way you want to go. Mainly Stride Breaker if you're playing in a more team-controlled environment. The slow is really valuable for sticking onto people and just overall causing disruption. Rammus is a pretty good champ at the moment as well. Definitely an A-tier pick. Works similar to Malphite as a good response, but I'd recommend Malphite after the buffs over Rammus, definitely. But Rammus does work in the top lane with the WE alternate levels, which you're going to take on him. Zac, also pretty good, pretty safe top laner. Works as a flex pick, similar to Rammus. Also sustain. He's actually more of an early game champion than people actually notice. I think that's the right way of phrasing it. Aurelia, also really strong at the moment. Has a lot of if you're good at Aurelia, she just has a lot of power through her overall damage and just outplay capability. You have to be really good at Aurelia to play her though. I wouldn't recommend playing this champ if you haven't put a lot of time into playing it. The S tier is going to go as follows. It's going to be Olaf, really strong with Enchanters, just overwhelmingly strong as a laner at the moment, really strong early game. Doesn't fall off as hard as he used to. His ult's really valuable and just being able to continuously sustain uptime on him. You want to mainly pick him into comps where there isn't a lot of escape tools on the enemy team and where they don't have a lot of dashes. Past that, Olaf, really good champion at the moment. Malphite, really, really good response on 4-5. You mainly want to pick Malphite into 3 or 4 AD comps where he just has a lot of power through his E, Frozen Heart, and his just natural amount of armor, which he obtains. Shen, really valuable. I've lost the ability to speak now. Really valuable champ to play in a clash at the moment. He just has a lot of map control. His R is really valuable. Gives him so much power in controlling the tempo of the game. Stops dives and just helps the bot meta. Maokai, better as a top laner than he was last patch. The buffs really helped him. He has a lot of disruption. He combos quite nicely with a lot of champions. You don't want to build demonics when you're playing top lane Maokai. You just want to go raw tank and just act as a kind of disengage, disruption, and just peel for your ADC. That's mainly how you want to play Maokai. Sub lane's really powerful as well, so definitely don't sleep on Maokai. Jax kind of went power neutral this patch. If anything, stronger. He got his E got changed, so now it coasts for full damage, and that can make him quite powerful. He does do a lot of damage. He's really powerful into a lot of matchups. He scales really well. His early game is just a bit weaker than it used to be. Gangplank, one of the strongest champs at the moment, getting nerfed this upcoming patch in 13.5 because he is so strong. His passive just does so much damage. Plus for that, with his Q, he can kill people without really needing to use his barrels at the moment, which is fairly unhealthy, but because of the amount of control he has through barrels, the amount of pressure he has through laning phase, the value Sheen has on GP, he's just a really strong champion. Definitely recommend playing GP. And Sion. Sion is a really good tank at the moment. Acts quite nicely as a blind pick if you need one. Does a lot of damage. Has a lot of health pool. You can go Radiant or Jaxo. I wouldn't recommend going Heartsteel, but it does work in certain matchups where you can just continuously proc it. So, overall, that's going to be the Clash top lane tier list. I'll make one of these for each role. But the main focus is just going to be this. Just making sure you're picking the right champs in the right situation. You don't really, unless you're like a main of a certain champion, you don't really want to diverge too far off the main like 7 here. But of course, if you play like something like Set and you're really good at Set and your Set is stronger than A-tier champions because you're good at piloting the champion, I'd recommend playing Set. So it's kind of how you want to interpret it, but for the most part, this is going to be the relative power of the champion and how it works within the draft. So these are like the main 7, and then so on, so on. So if you enjoy the content, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.